Welcome to this episode of Office Hours at Vanderbilt Divinity School. This is an interview series where we go behind the scenes with our lifelong learning instructors, our professors here at VDS, to hear more about their scholarly journey and what it looked like to develop their course. I'm Dr. Nathan Kost, and today we are joined by Dr. Ellen T. Armour. She is the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Professor of Feminist Theology and director of the Carpenter Program in Religion, Gender, and Sexuality. Ellen, welcome.
Thank you, Nate. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited.
Ellen, I'm so glad to have you on here. You are such a good friend to our lifelong learning program. And I'm so excited about the course that you have that's coming out, Healing Our Divides, Christianity, Gender, and Sexuality. Now, before we get into it, the
Mhm.
first question I'm going to ask is,
Mhm.
without using your title or the word professor, what do you do?
My goodness. Well, what do I do? Depends on the day, and it's a lot depending on the day. I teach courses, of course, and I teach courses in feminist theology, in religion, gender, and sexuality in a variety of ways. I also have developed this recent obsession with photography and digital media and social media. So that's a lot of what I do these days as well. And I also, when running the Carpenter program, that's a really cool thing that I get to do because it means that I get to take what I do, not just into my scholarship, but in the classroom to a wider community, which means I learn as much from that wider community as I think they learn from me. And it's just wonderful to be a part of trying to make this world a better place when it comes to these contested, difficult issues, and I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a heck of a job, Ellen. We're
Well,
grateful that
thank
you
you.
do it. One of the things that I love about working at VDS is especially getting to work closely with faculty members is you all actually make it so easy on us. I told one of our previous guests, Dr. Jimmy Bird, I said, my
Mhm.
job is to put it on a T for you, and you just put it on a T for me. So, Ellen, tell me about what it's like to learn from your own students. And what I mean is,
Mm.
have you grown as a scholar teaching at
Mhm,
a place like VDS that has students from
mhm,
all different backgrounds?
mhm,
And because your work is also in the community, you're
mhm,
not just siloed here with
mhm,
with
mhm,
MDiv students. So
mhm,
tell me a little bit about
mhm.
what that looks like for you.
Well, I'll give you just one pretty concrete example, if that'll work. And first, it's going to focus on my students, and then I'll say something about the community too. So I mentioned already my kind of obsession with photography and digital media and stuff. So I wanted to conduct an experiment with students in my class where I asked them to adopt certain religious gazes to look at
Mm.
certain images and photographs from social media is basically what they were, and asked them to decide. Well, first, I asked them to do this at the very beginning of the class when we hadn't read it, anything, not one assignment. And I asked them just to write down what they saw and how they felt and all those things when they were looking at this particular photograph. And it was a difficult photograph, for them to look at for sure. And then I said, just put that away, keep it, we'll come back to it later at the end of the thing. And so when we came back to it, after we had done, a lot of reading in the course, this is kind of one of the last things we did. I asked them to, one of the things I'd given them to read was what you might call a visual repertoire of
Mm.
gazes, religious gazes, that I got from a scholar named David Morgan from his book, The Embodied Eye. And I asked them to pick one of the gazes. Well, first I asked them to go back and read what they'd written when they were reflecting on this photograph and see whether or not any of these gazes matched how they were seeing. And to a person, they were able to identify a gaze that really did fit with what they were doing, what they were seeing, and how they were feeling. And then I asked them to pick one of the pictures again and look at it and deliberately choose a gaze and write down their reflections and what happened and, did things change, et cetera, et cetera. It was amazing, absolutely
Phew.
amazing. I mean, on the one hand, you could say one thing it did was confirmed my suspicion that, as David Morgan says, we're probably using these gazes already because, yes, they're religious gazes, but he already talks about them as larger than, or the objects of those gazes as larger than religious objects like icons and so on. That we are probably using those gazes already because they're gazes that come naturally to us,
Right,
phenomenologically speaking, if you will.
right.
So it confirmed that. But the other thing it confirmed for me is that deliberately adopting those gazes, if we were to do it, but even if we don't, if we're using those gazes, they can change us. They can
Mm,
change our perspective on things that we might be really surprised about. And what made it particularly moving for me were, I think, well, A, the honesty of the students, for one thing,
yeah.
but the depth of the emotional change, the emotional
Mm.
experience of looking at a photograph
Like
with a particular gaze.
the affect
Yes, the
quality, is that
affect,
what you
yes,
mean?
and that's what I
Okay.
call it, photographic affect. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay,
So that but that's just one,
right.
example, I mean, in a more specific one, but, oh, man, I also can think of times like I'm thinking of a community experience. Right now, we're running a program for the Carpenter program called Courageous Voices in Action, where we're bringing people from the community who want to be advocates for or more effective advocates for LGBTQIA people. And I've learned just, I mean, more than I can say in terms of, what real life experience looks like when you're doing that work on the ground with your feet on the ground, right? With those folks and the variety of things that people are doing. One of our members of the cohort actually started a Catholic organization for advocacy, and hearing him talk about the change that can come is really amazing. Same thing, another former student, Reverend Scott Mitchell, who started Grace Point Church, which is an evangelical church that became LGBTQIA affirming. And Scott now spends a lot of his time working with families who are struggling with, coming to terms with one of their children coming out as
Yeah.
LGBTQ. And he posts about that on Facebook. I mean, in a way that respects the privacy of those families. But I learned so much from reading him talk about what it's like to work with those folks and how it works, how he works with them and what that sometimes can accomplish, not always, but sometimes can accomplish. And it's humbling really um to see what can happen, what folks with the commitments to their faith and to the relationship of their faith to, for lack of a better word, hospitality and love, the kind of
Yeah.
things I see as central values of their faith, what it means to put that into action and what can happen as a result of that. It's really something.
I'm biased, but a quick plug here for Courageous Voices in Action, that Ellen and Assistant Director Dr. Rachel Heath, my little work neighbor,
Yes.
have done such an incredible job,
Yes.
with this group, this cohort, so if you're
Yes.
interested,
Yes.
you can check it out through the Carpenter Program website.
Yes.
It's really doing the work, so quick plug there for it.
Thank
Ellen, you mentioned the term phenomenological, so
Yeah.
I have to ask this question, the phenomenological question. How did you become interested or, to use that language, attuned to the phenomenon of gender and sexuality as a field that you would be interested in studying?
That's fascinating. Well, so I'll give you the sort of short version, but
Sure.
because it happened here at VDS actually. I after trying out a couple of other I'll back up. I was a music major in college to begin with, a piano major, then I remembered I hated to practice. So I kind of gave up on that and I had to invent a major for myself, which was a humanities major. Because if you do music for any period of time, and I did it for a year and a half, you aren't going to graduate in 5 years. I mean, 4 years. So you have to kind of do something creative. So I was fortunate to be in the honors program, and I got to do an honors thesis. And I decided what I wanted to do was a thesis on women in Appalachia because that's where my mom was from.
Okay.
And I'd never been there. I didn't know anything about it, but clearly it had made a major mark on her and on her sisters, her three sisters, and my grandmother, grandparents, and stuff who were from there. And so I persuaded my mom and my one of my aunts and one of my cousins to go with me up to Kentucky to drive up together and to go visit relatives there. And that was an amazing experience, hilarious in some ways. At one point, my mom and my aunt, their accents got more and more Appalachian the closer we get. And so
Uh-huh.
My mom was named Mary Ann, but by the time we got to that's what she went by. By the time we got to Appalachia by Eastern Kentucky, she was Murray. Why, Murray Ann. That's what my Aunt True was calling her. And anyway, it was just fascinating. That was kind of the beginning of it, just to kind of see
Okay.
how religion played a role in their lives.
Yeah.
But it really hit home when I started here at Vanderbilt. I came here to work with Sally McFague, who's actually my predecessor in the position I now hold. And she was really interested at the time. I was interested in religion and literature, and she'd written a book on that, and I loved her approach to that. So that's what brought me here to begin with. The very first day, I think, of orientation, we had a student group did a whole thing on inclusive language, and it
Mhm.
just blew my mind. And I was like, "Oh, wow, this is really what I want to do. I want to know more about this." And so more about the connections between the ways we gender God and how that, I guess, just how gender and sexuality are affected by and affect how we think theologically, what we believe, what we see in each other, in the world, all that stuff. So that's where it started.
That's just another example of learning from your students, Ellen,
Yes,
right?
yes,
It's part
yes,
of your
yes,
scholarly journey,
yes.
which I think is so cool. And also, I didn't know about the Appalachian roots.
Mhm. Yep.
My people are from West Virginia, so I can
Okay,
relate.
okay. Yeah, we're right on the border, actually. My mom was born in Huntington and, but raised in Pikeville.
You can't see it behind me, but on my shelf, I have my pappy's hard hat
Oh,
from he worked in the steel mill for 35, so I know how those accents can shift.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Ellen, here's a question that I have for you. I wanna about your
Mhm,
upcoming course, okay?
mhm.
A part of your course that I love is that you help us understand how we got here,
Yeah.
going all the way back to Augustine, and walking us through how
Mhm.
this conversation has evolved. So, I think for many of us in 2026, we feel like we're living in unprecedented times.
Yeah.
What is unique about the conversation around gender and sexuality in the church in 2026,
Mhm, mhm,
as opposed to, let's go back to Paul's letters, right?
mhm, mhm,
And then
mhm.
I'll give it away and say, I'm gonna ask the opposite as my next question, okay?
Okay. Perfect, perfect. Well, the biggest thing I think that is different is the role that both women and gender nonconforming people, LGBTQIA people, play in the church these days. I know most of the attention to these issues goes in the direction of the opponents to LGBTQIA involvement in the church and in society for that matter. A lot of that is religiously funded and a more conservative angle on Christianity, et cetera. That angle, of course, evangelical Christianity, very conservative evangelical Christianity, has been with us for a very long time. But what's changed in the past, I guess, I don't know how far back we would go because we would have to go back probably to the 70s, I guess, starting in the 70s,
Mm,
is what's happened in the mainline denominations, so-called mainline denominations. So many of those denominations have become certainly have been ordaining women and calling women to ministry for decades now, have been gay affirming for quite a while now and few decades now, not as long as they've been affirming of women, but for that a long time. And more recently, LGBTQIA plus affirming. Think about what's happened recently in the United Methodist Church. Of course, that's created a schism in that case, and generally that's been the case for lots of the mainline churches, and not just mainline churches, others as well. That this is an issue that is so divisive that church splits actually happen, denominational
right,
splits actually happen. And so, on one hand, you could say that's not new. That's been happening for since Christianity started.
yeah,
But the fact that it's around gender and sexuality in particular now is new.
yeah. What kind of parallels do you see between the conversation that we're having now and the conversation, say, going back to Augustine? What do you see that's been consistent in this conversation over the evolution?
What's been consistent, I think, is the complicated relationship between Christianity and culture, whatever its contemporary culture happens to be. And that consistency, sadly, has been one that is really very patriarchal and heteronormative and
Right,
cisnormative, we might say now, right? Well, cisnormative, maybe not so much, because that's complicated. That's a really complicated question when it comes to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. So we're consistency, I think, would be we might like to think when we're engaging in issues that are conflictual, that we are only bringing one lens to those issues, and that is the lens
right,
of faith, the lens of tradition, the lens of scripture, right? But that's never the case. First of all, scripture and tradition are themselves informed in response to the culture we find
Mm,
ourselves in, whatever that happens
yeah,
to be. For the earliest followers of Jesus, that was a complicated culture, run by a Roman Empire, basically, that considered Judaism, which is Jesus's own tradition from his birth to his death, that considered it a legitimate religion, but then when Christianity becomes this thing, in fact, Christianity starts as an insult, right? That word doesn't appear anywhere in the New Testament. Christianity, nowhere in the New Testament. And it started as an insult because of the Roman Empire's worry about this particular movement and what it might be, right? Remember, that's who killed Jesus, right? They saw him as a threat. And so the suspicion that was placed on Christianity then was really what Augustine's reacting to. But his reaction to it is itself inflected and informed by the culture that he's a part of. I
yeah,
mean, I could talk about that for days.
yeah,
It's and that includes the views of gender and sexuality that were present in
yeah,
Greco-Roman culture, but also his views about original sin. They really have stuck with Christianity for a long time, for
yeah,
centuries now,
yep,
are themselves formulated in relationship to an attempt to defend Christianity against the charge that the fact that the Roman Empire had chosen Christianity as its de facto religion, as its official religion, meant that they'd chosen the wrong God, and that was responsible for the fall of Rome. That's the whole reason
mhm,
he came up with this thing in the first place. So it's that complicated relationship between
yeah.
religion and culture. That's the consistent theme all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you answered this a bit, but I wanna dig a little bit deeper. I was raised evangelical. I believe
Yep.
you were also raised evangelical, is that right?
Well, I was raised Southern Baptist,
Southern
yes.
Baptist.
Yeah.
In many of our traditions, I was raised in the tradition of you just read the Bible and you do what it says, right? Like, I just believe what is written there. For folks that are trying to navigate this conversation that come from those traditions and they say, I'm not sure what to do with
Mm,
scripture. What do you have to say to that? Or how
mhm,
would you respond to that?
mhm. Well, I would respond to that by saying simply opening the book and reading it is not enough
Mm,
because of issues around translation, of issues around even understanding what's going on and what the writers are responding to. So I'd say it's really important to get educated, and that's pretty easy to do. But of course, finding reliable sources is tricky. So that's one of the things I try to talk about here, and I certainly rely on my colleagues here at the Divinity School who work on biblical studies and ancient languages and all of that stuff, that we wouldn't know what scripture says without that, right? Yeah, I mean, I can think of so many examples that are good. There's a very recent documentary that we screened here called 1946, which is the year that the decision was made to translate certain words, certain Greek words as homosexuality or homosexual, and what the consequences of that have been, given especially given that that was not a word that, existed back then, or even quite a concept in some ways that existed back then. So anyway, that's what I would say.
yeah.
But I think what's really good is, I mean, I talk about in my course an ethnographic study that someone did, John Moon did, to Methodist congregations wrestling with the questions, like these questions. And it was clear that they were really truly wrestling. The members of both congregations were really truly wrestling. So that I think is a good sign and something we need to continue.
Talking about congregations, and this is my last question for you here. I think back to when we first began having conversations in the fall about what this course could look like. And through those conversations, we wanted to put together something that could be a resource for congregations, right? So from your role as designer, as the
Mhm.
professor, what do you hope to see from congregations or groups that would take this course?
That's a great question. Well, I hope what it does is two things, maybe three. The first thing I hope it does is deepen and render more complex their understanding of what these issues open up and open onto, if you will.
Mm,
And I hope also that they come to appreciate the value of theology and the importance of theology to those issues. So often we think, well, it's just a matter of the Bible verses, but it's not. It's really about how we think about God, how we think about sin, how we think about all these things, and that's really crucial, how we think about human being. I hope they come to understand that a little bit more deeply. I also hope that they come to see that most of us, most of their fellow Christians out there who are dealing with these issues are genuinely wrestling with the questions and with what those questions mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ellen, I wish we could keep going. If I wish I could do this all day, but I'll just say for folks that are interested in this conversation, check out Ellen's new lifelong learning course that will be released this month, "Healing Our Divides: Christianity, Gender, and Sexuality." Dr. Ellen T. Armour, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Could I say one more thing, Nate?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay. This is back to what I hope folks will come
Yeah.
to with this course. I think the other thing is what we really need to wrestle with is what are our central values when it comes to our understanding of God? And so many times it seems like the conflict is between what? Our fear of divine judgment and our honoring of divine love. And I hope that
Uh,
really wrestling with that would be something that this course would inspire folks to do. And of course, I'm going to hope that where they land is on the side of divine love because I mean, fundamentally, that's what we say, right? God is love, right? And if that's the case, what does it mean for us to live into what we're being called to be, who we're being called to be by that divine love?
Ellen, I'm so glad you added that.
Mm.
That's that's a perfect summation of what we hope at VDS, our folks, our stakeholders, our partners, our
Yeah.
congregations encounter when they encounter your course in particular. Folks, check out the work of the Carpenter program. It's pretty awesome. So, thank you,
Okay.
Ellen.
Thank you, Nate.
All right.